Hello and welcome to the Defining Your Niche podcast. I am your host, Thaddeus Campbell. Joining me today, someone I'm happy to call a close friend at this point, Tim Kane of Belrose Storage Group, Vice President of Operations and Director of Acquisitions for them. Generally unbelievable guy and somebody that actually, it's interesting because our relationship has evolved. We started out in a business relationship. We did it. We're still doing a deal together, I guess I should say, but have gotten to know him very, very well over the last couple of years and been looking forward to having him on the show. And really excited because this is someone that's involved both in self-storage and on the Defining Your Niche podcast. We dive into storage and small bay flex. Belrose is not calling it small bay flex. It maybe isn't quite what we're doing in small bay flex, but it's a version of small bay flex that I'm really excited to talk to him about and do a deep dive with. So Tim, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Thad.
First question I always ask, because especially you in doing both of these different niches, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone who wasn't born into a family that was doing storage or small bay that set out to get into these asset classes. How did Tim Kane end up getting in? I know you started out with Belrose and storage and then evolved into what you guys call pro storage. How did Tim Kane find himself in these wonderful asset classes?
Yeah, great question, Thad. And it's the the classic entrepreneurial story. I got my reps in the residential world, 2012, 2013. I was actually at Department of Defense, had a nice career ahead of me, nice GS schedule. I'm in the DC area, as you know, so a lot of people work for the government. It was safe. It was nice. But unfortunately, I lost my father early in my 20s, and he was just a year into retirement. And that I was investing in real estate at the time, part-time, but that was just a kick in the butt to go follow my dreams and my passion. And that was real estate and entrepreneurship. So fast forward, fix and flip, owned a home investors franchise, the We Buy Ugly Houses, flipping 40, 50 flips a year, a lot of work, a lot of jobs, and short-term capital gains, right? So I just, I didn't want any more tenants. I didn't want any more toilets. I didn't want any more flips and whatnot. So I was either going to go into mobile home parks or self-storage. And I researched both in 2017, 18. And then I pulled the trigger after my residential mentor told me about self-storage, that he was involved in a syndication. So in 2019, I joined the Scott Myers Mastermind. And that's where it all clicked with, as you know, Joe Downs, my partner, has been on this call, and I met them, and they came from a world where they were really good at raising capital, their corporate structure, and their team was great, but they couldn't find deals. And I'm coming from a world where I'm closing on 40 properties a year off market, and that's all I live and breathe. So it was a nice synergy there of my acquisition experience and operations, project management, and then their corporate, raising capital, commercial experience. And now, 6 years later, 20 something facilities down, and now a niche inside of the niche, which we are both passionate about. And here we are in the flex space.
I love hearing these stories, and I want to dig in. I have like 5 different questions to ask you, but the first one is going to be about the power. You mentioned it twice, right? You talked about Scott Myers, a mastermind we were both in. That's the first time I met you in person this past February, a year ago right now in Sarasota. And then you talked about your mentor in fix and flip. How important has it been for you to constantly, because I know you still do, constantly educating yourself, constantly putting yourself in those rooms? What has that meant to Tim Kane's growth?
Yeah, and I know you echo this as well. And I think we're both in the spots we are because of this, right? We work in the mindset of abundancy, not scarcity. It's having a mentor. My biggest pet peeve is a greedy person that's a soul that just wants every single dollar, and they're just going to do it themselves because they don't need help. That's great. If they do 1 or 2, they might get away with it. But I tell you, I surround myself with better people. My team, they're all smarter than me, and they should be, right? They all have their own skill sets. We're all continuing education with each other. We're championing each other. We learn something every single day. We go around the table and say what we failed at that day, because fail is not a bad word in our circle.
Love it.
And if you're not, it's better to fail early as possible, to be honest, right? It's if you're entrepreneurship and success and whatnot is not a straight line up. It's
No.
ebbs and flows and bumps along the way. So going back to, I can't tell you how much having a mentor and just the right people around you is so important, because it's a security blanket, it's a safety net, even if it's hired help, to be honest, even if it's a third party, right?
Yep.
Surround yourself with experts to not make, it's okay if it's a little pricey or whatnot, but you can make a bad decision that could ruin, that game over, right? So I'm a big advocate of that. And I think in this world, like Thad, how I met you too, it's everyone's a giver in our space.
Isn't that true?
This isn't like residential where everyone's like cutthroat because we're all in the same area and going after things. I think it's good people we've immersed ourselves in, and everyone gives. And oh man, I really messed up on that cost segregation, I should have done one, etc. Right? So it's give a penny, take a penny. And that's why I love this asset class.
Yeah, you talk about something that I've found to be so warming, and I'm a lot older than you, and have been in a few different industries in my life. Storage is probably the fifth business asset class I've been involved in, and just never seen anything like the willingness to share, right?
Mhm.
That ability, I'll never forget, talking to Storage Mart and Mike and Alex Burnham, and we were doing a project at the time in San Antonio. They're like, well, send us your plans. We'll give you our insight. We have a couple stores in the market. We'll tell you what we think of the unit mix and maybe what we think you should do with it. And I'm like, we already were signed up with CubeSmart to manage it. They were like, no worries, we don't care. We'll do this for you. And it was like, man. And I asked Mike Burnham that question actually. He was on the podcast and he's like, look, if you build the wrong product next door to me, you hurt my product.
Yeah.
So I'm invested in helping you, and it's not just magnanimous. And I thought that was so powerful. Anyway, I'm diverting. I want to ask another question,
Yeah,
which
love it.
is the importance of having a team. You talked about hooking up with Tom Dunkel and with Joe
Yeah.
Downs, and it's not just the three of you. I know you three are partners, but you have other people working with you on these projects where you're either acquiring or developing, whether it be self storage or it be the pro storage model that you're doing. Would it even be possible for one person to do these things? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I would say if you're doing one at a time and you're a utility player, it's all about. I'm a big component of why learn a new skill this later in the game where why don't you just emphasize on your skill set, right? Go on steroids on your skill set and delegate or team up with people that are better than you in other things.
Yep.
Like I love it. I read it. I see it on social media. I'm not trying to learn it. There's people in 10 years that have been studying it. I'm hiring them and they're going to crush it for us, right?
Yeah.
So going back to it is, yes, you could do maybe one at a time. You could do it okay, but I tell you, there's no way to scale, right? Right. We all know that that's the best way to scale is to maximize your skill set and leverage what you don't know and what other people are good at. So we've got a team of eight core Belrose team members, and then a plethora of, just like you guys do, virtual assistants, owners rep companies, etc., legal, because there's no way we could be. I know we're not the biggest shop in town, but 20 facilities since 2021. There's no way we could have done that, by ourselves.
That's
So
just phenomenal, man. You guys have acquired or built 20 properties in a 4 year, less than 4 years, really,
that's
which is
good. Yeah.
is phenomenal to hear. And this is something that was so mind-boggling to me. I can still remember the first time I saw a budget for a ground-up self-storage project, and that was
Yeah.
like middle of 2021, by the way, which
Oh
the
yeah.
costs have changed markedly, especially when you throw in the cost of debt. They've literally almost doubled in some cases. So just when you start thinking about these numbers, it makes sense that you're not going to break this down with one person. And for you guys to be able to do 20, as you said, how do you fill all those roles? Because there's 50 different things that need to get done, even on
Oh
on
man.
an acquisition, let alone building something ground up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we have our structure is OpCo, PropCo, HoldCo for every single facility. I mean, just that alone. I
Yeah.
mean, that's we have over 100 LLCs right now. You know, like it's just that structure and then that due diligence checklist and checking with the county on taxes and this person does this and this person's in charge of dispo and ops and third party reports. Everyone works together in that ecosystem, but they've gotten really good at it. It's kind of the Henry Ford assembly line scenario.
So I'm going to go back and rewind a little bit. And first of all, I just want to give you some kudos because, and God bless losing your father in your 20s. I'm going to call my dad after we're done and just express some gratitude that he's 81 years old and it's not promised. So I thank you for sharing that.
Of
But it's
course.
interesting to me because you're not the only person that lost their father when they're in their 20s.
Yeah.
What was it other than just your dad that gave you that wherewithal? Obviously that's the spark, but
Oh yeah.
something in Tim Kaine had the ability to say, "Hey, listen, we're going through it now. Maybe now you're very grateful you left that government job with what's
Yeah.
going on in DC right now, but was there another spark that led you down this entrepreneurial path because that takes some guts?"
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate that. And everyone has a similar story in the entrepreneurial world, and ever since I mean, I was the paper boy in 8, 9 years old in my area, and I was going after that free trip to Disney World at 10 years old, and I was door knocking, just like you tell me about with your son and what he's up to these days, which is so encouraging. I was door knocking at 10. I didn't realize it, but I was for to sign up for a $2 paper. So I've always just
Isn't that
had that.
crazy?
Yeah, man. I've just always had that. It's a double edged sword. I'm never, and you hear this a lot in our spaces. You're never satisfied, right?
Yeah.
You're like you hit something and then you go after it. So if you enjoy the journey, it's all about the journey and not that your goals are gonna get bigger and bigger, right? We all know that. But just I've always had that. I think my father, he was a police officer for 30 something years, but he always had a side hustle. He always had a VHS tape and some type of supplement he was selling or whatever, man. But I think there was always that and earning money. Even at age 14, I grew up in Maryland. You could get a job, like a legal job, $5.15 an hour at a local deli. The day I turned 14, I got that job. And it's
Yeah.
just something about earning that, earning something that intrigued me, gave me that self worth. So I've just always had it. And then when I graduated college in 2009, if you go back there, if you remember, that was the worst economy
Oh
that
yeah.
we've had in modern history during that. Like the wage increases were frozen.
Yeah.
No one could get jobs. Remember that? Unemployment was
I remember it
insane.
all too well. I was a little older than a college graduate and I owned a business
Oh,
at the time, so I
oh
felt
man,
it.
you can empathize then. But man, I got into the workforce. I was like, oh my God, I just went 4 years to school. What am I doing? So thankfully, I had a family friend that was a chief over in the Department of Defense that he knew me for a long time and he knew my work ethic and whatnot. And I got into that. But again, that was a safe, secure job at the time. It wasn't what I wanted to do. So I grinded for 7 years in that job, but I was sitting at a desk. It was finance. It was finance work for the Department of Defense.
Yep.
I look back at that time, and it's not wasted because that taught me how to be on time. That taught me to wear a suit every day, to give presentations in front of cohorts and be professional. So when I did take that jump, I had that professional experience that I needed, right?
Yeah.
So I never take that as a wasted time. But when my dad passed, it was very soon right after. It was like, I'm not letting that happen to me. Like they were going to travel the world. My mom and my dad were. He worked on Christmas. The classic police officer with his radio at the
Yeah.
on the kitchen table.
Yeah.
He worked his butt off, and I was not going to work 30 years, and then you never know what's going to bring. So I jumped ship. I gave my government ID card. I was at the Pentagon. It was a big deal. People thought I was crazy. I woke up the
Yeah.
next morning. I was like, "What have I done?" like a
Fast
notepad.
forward 8 years,
Yeah.
and it's a little different story as you guys are looking at 21 and 22 assets. It
Yeah.
just in ground up development. I'm going to stay in this space a little bit because you
Yeah.
talked about flipping houses. I've flipped houses 40, 50 a year. You have
Yeah.
to have an acquisitions pipeline that is really, really strong. People don't understand. Like we could talk about the housing market now is a little better in the time when you were doing it. But
Yeah.
to be able to flip that many houses, you got to find that many houses. So I
Yeah,
want you to
man.
talk to me about the process of setting up an acquisitions pipeline in residential and how that's translated to you in the self storage world.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I really do like that was my blessing was when I got into storage, not a lot of people knew how to do that yet to go after off market acquisitions.
Yeah,
So when I brought 3 or 4 paper copies of $2 million, $3 million facilities way undervalued, people were like, their minds were blown. It was like, what do you mean you flew down to Asheville and you got them to sign a contract on the hood of your truck? How did you do that?
yeah,
So that skill set, you're exactly right. It's all about the pipeline. So it's a marketing machine, right? So it's the same thing we talk about. It's, prospecting, outbound marketing, your SEO, your web presence, your Google, your AI, your physical marketing, your mailing, right? Your cold calling, virtual assistants, whatever your platform is, you got to have that lead funnel,
yeah.
right? So we have virtual assistants calling 300 facilities a day. We have 3 VAs and they're calling
100
300
calls
facilities. They
each.
call 100 a day.
Yeah,
But I think where a lot of people get it wrong is they don't police or manage their prospectors or their, business development, meaning I just got off one last night. We do mock calls every single week with our virtual assistant team. And then we give out bonuses, hefty bonuses, because we rate those mock calls.
yeah.
So I think that's the differentiator is we continue going back to continue education. You've just you can't just hire cold callers and wish for the best,
Yeah.
right? You gotta help them with the script. You gotta tweak. You gotta work out the processes and all that good stuff. So it's all about the lead funnel. But in the residential world, I was a 3 to 4% conversion rate. So think about that. 100 leads come in,
You get
and
three
I'm
to four.
on 3 of those.
Right.
So I took rejection very well. That's the other thing
Yeah.
too. Like, get hung up on deal with crazy people and whatnot, but it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
And if you're having fun doing it and you're improving it and you're A/B testing and you just get into your rhythm, man, that's where the value. I truly believe one of the most important people on your team is that acquisitions person. That's you control the deal. If you find and source the deal, you control everything else. So it's such a great skill.
I obviously came from the similar world, not at the
Yeah.
level that you were doing it. I flipped 7 houses in a year and a half, 2 years. So it was a little bit smaller than your
That's
scale,
still a lot. Yeah, still a lot.
um
Yeah.
but that skill set you talked about translates so well into what we're doing. And I got into storage actually as a disposition guy to, speaking old
That's
school
nice. Yeah.
residential wholesaling language. I was brought in to take entitled storage deals, whatever stage of entitlement, and sell them. And I had that skill set. I had actually run an acquisitions team for a wholesaling company. And I love that you said that. I'm actually setting one up for Small Bay Flex now. Same thing where
Yeah.
it's like
Beautiful.
you have to. But I love what you said. I meet with my team for 2 full hours a week. 3 days a week,
That's
meet with them for 2 hours.
not a lot of people do that,
You
right? That's
have to
amazing.
be training. I found this out, and I love that you said it in my martial arts career. I told you I owned a business in
Yeah.
2009. I ran a martial
Yeah.
arts school at the time. When I was training with my teacher, Tiger Schulman, my school did better. When I slacked on my training, my school did worse. It was automatic. You are always a higher performer when you're learning yourself. I will go to my grave believing that and love that you said it. I didn't have to tell you. I didn't have to preach it. You brought it out, which I think is fantastic. So I want to talk about this piece of it. I mean, I'm still blown away that you guys have acquired 20 different properties since 2021. You talked about incentivizing your acquisitions people with bonuses for how good they do their calls. How else do you incentivize those guys to be making 100 calls a day is not easy. That's a lot of phone
No,
calls. How
it
else do you
is.
incentivize them to want to be doing that level of work?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Thad. And it's all about the culture, right? No one wants to. You could have the best job in the world, but if you have a bad team, it ruins it, right? If you have a
Yeah.
bad culture, it ruins it. So not only is it the bonusing of the financial component, but it's the sense of community and culture that we champion each other. You know what I mean? It's friendly competition. You always got to have some competition in there, right? But it's
Yeah.
friendly competition, and we're all bettering ourselves. And I think that's a huge proponent of it, right? So it's, yes, you have the financial aspect of it, but when you have the support and people are cheering you on, there's nothing better than getting a call from one of them and letting me, like, leads in your inbox, call, they're retiring, and you can tell they're genuinely excited. It's like, I established bond and rapport. I did that thing you told me about. I made a joke of how many calls they get a day, and you can generally tell that they're passionate about it and they're a team player. So I think it's that sense of like cheering each other on and having fun with it. Like we joke around all the time. Don't get me wrong, we get business done, but you got to keep it light, because calling 300 people a day, and for people that are usually getting called all day, every day, it's not the most glamorous. You're not curing cancer over here, right?
Yeah.
It's a grind. So just championing each other and respecting their work ethic and being there for each other and just having fun, I think is a huge part of it.
I knew there's a reason you and I get along so well. Very much on aligned in our values, and
Yeah.
especially about hiring people. Because you hire a team, man, you better know how to take care of those people. I mentioned Tiger Schulman, my martial arts teacher, and kudos to him, because he didn't just teach us martial arts. He taught us how to interact with people and how to treat people in a way to run a business that sticks with me now, which is pretty cool. You'd never think I learned more from him in martial arts than I learned in college, which is hard for me to
I love
say with what I spent going to college. But anyway, to your point about continuing to educate yourself, I want to dig into this pro storage model that you guys have really. You were the first people I heard talk about what I now consider small bay flex, and even though the way you guys go about it might be slightly different, it's you're targeting the same market we are with our
Mhm.
product as well. So first question to ask you is, how did you guys even come across this kind of niche within the self-storage niche?
Yeah, that we all learn, like we started this with learning from your mistakes and surrounding yourself with good people here. So one of the facilities we acquired that we were blessed to get seller financing on was this large format facility, 60,000 net rentable, down in Wilmington, North Carolina. We didn't know what we didn't know, right? We just took this as, okay, that's a little weird. There's only 93 units, but it's 60,000 square feet, and the doors are 14 feet tall, and those could probably be expensive. And I don't know, it's seller financing, it checks all the boxes on the market, let's give it a go, right?
Yeah.
And then we started peeling back the onion of, holy crap, the average length of stay is over 3 years, but it's
Yeah.
month to month rent. Okay, on
Wow.
our dashboard, how many people are on auto pay? Holy crap, 100% is on auto pay. Oh, what's delinquency? Zero. Okay. What the
Yeah.
heck is going on?
Yeah.
Right. So once we peel back the onion and we got to know our customers, it was all small business owners.
Yeah.
Right. So everyone had it on their company credit card. People paid a year in advance. And why there's no delinquency is because they have tens of thousands of dollars of, HVAC equipment in there.
They
Right.
can't afford a padlock on the door. Their business is shut down.
No. No. And then it's like, why is there, and there's no break-ins? Well, because they're there every day. Like that facility, yes, you got to budget for a little bit more wear and tear in your gate, et cetera, right? You got to look at both sides, but they take care of it. They're proud. That's their livelihood. So they get to know their neighbors and like, oh, I'm a plumber. I'm renovating a house. I think an electrician rents down the aisle, or they just look out for each other. A lot of them know each other. Their work vans pull up around the same time. So what we saw, we went back to a sense of community. Once we saw is like looking at the cameras and spending time down there. They all pull up 7, 8 a.m., have their cup of coffee. We have a shared bathroom there that we were just like, oh, this is going to be a pain in the butt to clean all the time. That bathroom is used more than a Home Depot bathroom. Like it is that, like, honestly, having a cup of coffee and using a restroom, meeting with your team and leaving for the day,
Yeah.
we started to see like patterns there, right? Of like, wait, something's on to something. Then what happened, Thad? in 2023, 2024, when people stopped buying houses,
Yeah.
that was the first time storage was like, oh, whoa, wait a second. We need people to buy houses and to move for storage to operate like it usually is. All of a sudden, we're having the natural move outs, but not the natural move ins, right?
Yep.
Well, this isn't based on the housing market anymore. This is businesses, right?
Yeah.
So it takes out of the more like that was one of the cons that I've seen recently in storage, which is rebounding, by the way, right?
Yeah.
But for the first time, storage wasn't getting that 95% occupancy anymore because once people move out, no one's transacting. What title companies were down 50, 60% in transactions last year.
Yeah.
So when companies, it's great because it's the same philosophy of a good market and a bad market. Businesses, when they grow, they need more space. They move out of their garage or their small whatever into our 1,000 square foot units.
Yeah.
Businesses, when they're not doing great or they're trying to value engineer and they're getting out of their 3-year triple net lease for 10,000 square feet where they only need a fraction of that, that's $8,000 a month.
Yeah.
They're going to come into us where it's more flexible, where it's month to month. And then if they're e-commerce or whatnot and their inventory shifts, guess what? They can rent more units in the winter if seasonal, if that's their big season. And then they can go down to one unit, on off,
Because
like
they
this
have
is
that month to month ability to
yeah,
cancel their lease helps them immensely.
100%. And then it's the best of both worlds because you're charging premium pricing because it's month to month, the hotel airline model, but they're staying 3 years. So you have long-term tenants.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect storm because there's nowhere else for them to go. Right. So it's insane. So a light bulb went off. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question that I'm intrigued by immensely, which is, one of the things about storage that's so easy is you can go on a Radius, Store Track, Yardi. There's another one, that name I'm missing off the top of my head right now, but there's four different Tract IQ. There you go. Noah, I'm sorry, I forgot it for a second. Shout out to Noah Starr. He's a good dude. You've got 4 different sites where I can go online and I can identify rates for a 5x5, a 5x10, a 10x10, a 10x15, a 10x20. In a 3-mile radius, a 1-mile radius, a 5-mile radius. I mean, I can get so much data. Now, we can argue about how relevant that data is in this day and age as they're playing the rate game on the REIT level. But the fact is, in 30 seconds, I can determine whether a market's, whether I should dig deeper or not. We don't have this in these larger unit sizes. And so my question for you is, long-winded in getting here, but I'm going to get to a question. How do you identify a market? And I know you guys are doing a couple of ground-up developments that you're working on. How do you identify whether or not these larger units, you mentioned it, 93 units in a 60,000 square foot net rentable, you're well over 500 square feet a unit on average. How do you identify what your rates are going to be and whether or not this thing is going to pencil?
Yeah. And that's like, so that's the $1 billion question, right? So let me throw it back to you and just say one thing on that. We can go on those 4 sites and get exact supply index and demand, but so can everyone else. Everyone can do that, right? Yeah. So the big PE firms, the REITs, everyone, that's why storage is where it's at today, right? Don't get me wrong, storage is plentiful and we love our existing portfolio and it pays the bills. We love it. But the barrier to entry into storage with all the technology and access, it's everyone is an expert, right? Yeah. So when you niche down to a new product, a short-term flex, or a pro storage, what we're calling it, Store Pro, that's you develop your own. And it's double-sided because in our opinion, no one's done exactly what we've done because we know there's so many different ways to go about this. What you guys are doing is beautiful. Like we're all, our friend James Reed is doing another, portion of it. So what we did was we're like, okay, how are we going to raise money? How are we going to show people we can do this? We've got to go start from scratch and build out our own due diligence and feasibility. So that's what we did over the last 18 months. So we take several different asset classes, market indicators. We look at what we don't want to do, Thad, is go into a market that's not on the path of progress. There's a lot of similarities. We need population growth. median household, we actually want higher than storage because we want, because at the same time you have duality with boat and RV as well, which we're not, you know what I mean? Which is beautiful. So we want more of a median household income, path of progress, population. But what we don't want is a huge manufacturing plant that employs the whole town.
Right.
We want a fragmented market. We want as much small businesses as possible.
Yeah.
Right. Because those are our customers.
Yes.
So we pull all data, like the amount of data we have pulled is insane. And we're going to keep doing it until we perfect it. But we want to see how many contractors there are. So we go to the local national, every National Association of Home Builders, they all have local chapters, right? We go to the builders, we go to the GCs. How many plumber licenses are there? How many RV registrations and boat registrations are there? How many electricians are there? How many e-commerce companies that LLC is registered? So you not only look at traditional storage and the normal supply index, because at the end of the day, you still have that, even at our existing facility, you still have someone has a beautiful vintage Mustang there, and it's just kind of their car condo, right? At the end of the day, you still have retail storage.
Yeah.
So you follow that, but then you add in the boat RV demand, which we just talked about, the small business demand, e-commerce, the surrounding areas, path of progress, and you kind of put them all together. And then the finishing touch is comparing it against flex space.
Right.
So you really got to strip out flex space because then you have the triple net, right, part to it. Yeah. So you're looking at, okay, how much is flex space charging? Wow, they're charging X amount of in dollar per square foot. This was built in the 70s. The doors are short. There's no bathroom, and they're still getting, $1.37 a square foot. What's going on here? Yeah. So I say a long-winded answer of we have just proprietarily built our own feasibility, and then we had to go find an expert because with these loans, banks still love storage. So to them, this is still storage, right? Yeah. This isn't all brand new. Right. So we made sure to go out to a third-party feasibility company that understood this product and created a custom feasibility that banks will accept, and they do. Love it. So that was tough, man. That was the hard part.
I love this. It's one of the reasons I like Flex, because you said go out and get the rates for Flex, but here's the reality. Flex doesn't have the website Storage does where you can go get data info. You got to call. I was out in Vegas this past weekend. I had to sit down with brokers. I've got to talk to them. I can't just go on a website. We have CoStar. CoStar's rate information especially for small bay Flex for 1,000 to 2,000 square foot units. They're amalgamating the averages for 50,000, 100,000 square foot units. So I love this part of it. At the end of the day, it's work. Right? Yeah, you've got to go and you've got to dig. So I love the fact that you guys have embraced that, and it's it's a blue ocean, which is a little scary because you don't know how deep it is. You don't know what lives in it. But on the flip side, you get to chart your own course and you get to do your work. Listen, as hard as it is to believe, I try and keep this to 30 minutes so people can digest it, but to honor your time as well. And I actually taping another podcast right after this, so I would talk to you for another half hour, but can't appreciate you enough for coming on and sharing your journey. I'm glad I got to know you even more through this journey, which is one of the reasons I love hosting the podcast, because you really get to hear people's story and get to hear some things I otherwise didn't know about Tim Kane. So appreciate you being so forthwith with all the information about the Pro Storage, but also sharing your journey, man. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, thanks so much, Dad. I really do appreciate and grateful for what we have, man.
Tim Kane, VP of Operations and Acquisitions Director for Belrose Storage Group. I guess we're going to start calling you Belrose Development Group now as you're moving into this pro storage space. Can't thank you enough. That's it for this week's episode of the Defining Your Niche podcast. As always, we want to thank PropRise for sponsoring the program. Yet another example of something that is making your life in storage that much easier. The guys at PropRise are amazing. You could touch base with them if you want to get a demo. If you got anything of value out of the podcast, please hit the like button. Please give us a subscribe on the YouTube channel, and we'll see you guys next week.